that we didn't agree on the $272 million tax cut. So for him to stand in front of you tonight and say that no one has told him that, I think that calls something into question. I thought the governor's speech tonight was excellent. It's nice to see someone who actually takes the job of governing seriously in this country these days, compared to what's going on at the presidential level. As an example, the governor demonstrated what our politics ought to be about. And I'm very proud to be a Minnesotan and have our governor be that kind of leader. I'm going to let Senator Bakk go next, and then we can answer some questions.
Well, thank you, Paul. I thought the governor set a good tone in reaching out to the legislature in a bipartisan way. I really appreciated his early remarks about what a great state we all live in. I mean, I think it's important that governors remind us about the quality of life we have in this state, the strong business infrastructure we have, how we're leading the nation in so many ways. So, you know, I've often felt that governors need to be the state's cheerleader, and I thought he led very strongly on that. On his agenda for the legislative session, I think I can say the Senate's on a very parallel track. We deeply care about the fiscal stability of the state's budget. We're going to be back here a year from now with a new legislature, putting a new two-year budget together, and we don't want to make decisions this year that put the state back into crisis management. So I appreciate the fact that he indicated that was his #1 priority. Also, the Senate has been trying hard for a number of years to get something significant done on transportation. I really appreciate the governor's attention to that and his strong position on investing in the public infrastructure in our state. So we look forward to working with him on those priorities. We look forward to providing a very targeted but responsible tax bill that'll provide some tax relief to middle-income Minnesotans that we know many are who are still struggling. So with that, I think we'll be happy to take questions.
Does very targeted go beyond the child care tax credit that the governor specifically mentioned tonight?
Well, we are going to name the Senate tax conferees tomorrow. I was pleased to see that the House has already done that for the tax bill and the transportation bill. We will be doing that tomorrow in the Senate. So we will get those conference committees back to work. I think that gives us, actually not getting that work done last year puts us at a huge advantage this year for a starting place to get to the conversation about a tax bill and a transportation bill. There are some things in the Senate tax bill that I think before the forecast we really would have liked to have accomplished, but it got more difficult with the updated budget forecast. I do think the Senate is still pretty interested in a workforce housing tax credit. I mean, there are places around this state where businesses want to expand, but purely can't because they have no workforce. And they have no workforce because they couldn't bring people in, even if they could find them, because there are no place for them to live. And it runs all the way from down in Worthington up to Roseville. So there are some pockets around the state that I think rural economies could benefit a great deal by doing something with a workforce housing tax credit. I would, as being the architect in 2010 of a significant expansion of the research and development tax credit, I'm interested in building on that. The Senate has some language in our Senate tax bill in the conference committee on that. I've often felt that tax policy is very, very important, and you need to focus it in ways where you're going to create economic growth. So we're going to be, I think, very careful that in addition to, and I believe the Senate will have a strong support for the governor's position on the child care tax credit, but in addition to that, we do some things that help stimulate the economy, especially in rural areas of the state.
Senator, the governor's pledge to work on unemployment tax reduction separately this session help get that unemployment benefit issue moving quicker?
Well,
Changes the House?
Well, I think it certainly is helpful that when the governor makes a strong statement like that. The Speaker and I had a good conversation today about the whole unemployment issue. You know, at the end of March, another large cohort of Minnesotans on the Iron Range are going to be exhausting their unemployment. So there is some significant urgency in getting this done. We had a good conversation today about both of those issues, the unemployment and the tax issue. I'm actually meeting tomorrow morning with the unemployment division over at Deed to talk about the tax provisions, because I haven't been part of any of those discussions of what that rebate would look like, who would get it, how much is prudent to do. And then the Speaker and I talked about trying to get back together sometime later tomorrow, talk about is there a deal on this, because the Senate is going to pass a clean bill on an unemployment extension for those laid off Iron Rangers tomorrow. And my hope is that the Speaker and I can reach an agreement on a path forward so that they can take it up tomorrow when they receive it, because they'll be coming in later in the afternoon after the Senate has met in the morning. So that really is my goal, is to try to find a way to land that bill on the governor's desk this weekend.
Now that we're doing this a very short session here, how much do you think realistically you'll be able to get done in the Senate?
Well, I mean, I don't know. We introduced 185 bills yesterday in the Senate. We've got a backlog of stuff left from last year. I imagine there'll be another 100 bills tomorrow. I don't know what all is there. I can tell you, I have a few priorities that are important to me that I, as the leader, am going to try and move forward. On the policy side, and first we're going to try deal with policy and move those things along because of the very early deadlines. I mean, on April 1st is the first deadline, and a bill has to be out of the policy committees either in the House or the Senate. So there's some urgency in trying to move policy stuff early, especially bills that have to go through a number of committees. So we're probably not going to talk a lot about spending bills and what our priorities are there until we get some of the policy provisions moved along. We don't have enough hearing rooms in the new building to accommodate committee hearings for both policy committees and finance committees during the day. So we've got to give hearing room priority to the policy committees here up until the committee deadlines. And I can tell you my first policy priority after the unemployment is going to be paid family leave. And that bill has to go through a number of committees, so its first hearing in the Senate, I believe, will be next Monday. I'm looking forward to that conversation. I have reached out to the business community, both chamber and business partnership, way back in July, and sat down physically with them and asked them to figure out what is it that you could support so that we can improve workplaces for families when they have medical issues or new children in their family. So I started on this more than 6 months ago and made it clear to the business community it was important to me. So that probably after unemployment is my number one priority, but there won't be time for everything.
And I would just say, I think that's a great question. You know, there's a lot of talk about kind of the politics and the short session and budget, you know, all those limitations. I just hope we don't give up on the session before it even begins, and I'm starting to get the sense that some people are starting to do that. And we need to make sure that we are as bold and ambitious as we possibly can be, because the people of Minnesota deserve that.
Senator, to clarify there, on paid family leave, are you talking about the governor's proposal strictly for state employees or Senator Thiessen's broader?
I'm a co-author on Senator Thiessen's bill. And I think before people get too alarmed, it's going to go through changes. It has to go through a number of committees. And there is a provision in the introduction that provides for businesses that are already doing this to be able to have an off-ramp, because we certainly want to reward businesses that are already doing this and acknowledge their efforts. So I think people should be a little careful to rush to judgment. I want people to work with us as we move this forward. I want the business community to work with us as we move forward.